We're now, what, 7, maybe 8 weeks into lockdown. I lose track of time. But like most people, I suppose I've been doing quite a lot of thinking. And you think about what's going to come after this, because it's a very, very uncertain period. And I think particularly what that's going to mean for education. Because I think the irony is, futurists who, let's face it, get a pretty bad rap sometimes, they're experiencing a kind of delayed validation. By that I mean, they've been talking about teleworking for years, that we'll do more teleworking in the future, and people tend to kind of not taking a great deal of notice. And yet here we are today, this very day, Twitter have announced that their workers, after the coronavirus, don't need to go back into the office. They can continue to work from home as long as they like. And then the other thing is, we've been talking about a need for global interdependence, and this virus doesn't care which country you live in. And then the third thing is that we're witnessing a massive truncation in design and production timescales. And I think we're not going to go back to the way things were at the end of all this. Now, schools and education, it seems to me, have got this kind of acquired immunity to this sort of radical thinking. But coronavirus has overcome even that. So the kinds of things we've been predicting in education for years, like blended learning and personalisation and greater participation by parents, the things which, if we're to be honest, I think people have been resisting, and yet in a couple of weeks it's now fully assimilated. So I think that's very encouraging, but there's still some big questions that remain from all of this, which is what kind of a world is going to emerge after Corona, and how can our kids thrive in it? And I just want to share just two obvious kind of implications, it seems to me, in all of this. The first is that the future of work has now changed irreversibly. We're never going to go back to a time when everybody came in and sat in an open plan office 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. That's not going to happen. So if millions of us don't need to be in a workplace and we can work from home, then do we need to live in big expensive cities? Probably not. So there'll probably be a redistribution of population, and certainly the trend towards megacities, I think, is going to be put into reverse. But if teleworking becomes the norm, then it probably means that more and more of us, and this was already happening, but even more of us are going to be working on short-term contracts, we're going to be freelancers, and there will be a global auction for skills, because both client and the worker themselves can look all over the world to find the right kinds of relationships. And this was already happening. It certainly happened to me. Up until 10 years ago, I worked exclusively in the UK, and now I've had to find work in many countries around the world. For our young people, it's going to be even more important. The second of these implications, you can't sugarcoat it really. We're heading towards a Great Depression, not a recession, probably the most severe depression that we've seen in maybe 300 years. And sadly, in all depressions, young people are disproportionately affected. So what do schools need to do so that in 5 years' time, we're not just protecting our students, we're enabling them to thrive in this new world? I just want to share two possibilities, really, I guess, for schools. The first is that they could become kind of centres of ingenuity. It seems to me that global shocks invariably trigger a kind of counter explosion in innovation that comes afterwards. And I don't see any reason why this one should be any different. In fact, we've already seen it during Corona. So if that's going to happen, our students need to be well positioned for that, to be at the forefront of that. And if they're going to do that, then they need to get as much practice as possible in working creatively and collaboratively producing things while they're in school and while they're in college, not afterwards. And I think the second thing is that schools could also become centres of community, because in this more distributed and economically more disadvantaged population shift that we're going to see, schools could really become a focal point for what I call people-powered innovation, grassroots innovation, where people are taking more responsibility for their place, the place that they live in. And schools can be right at the heart of that. But they can also become centres of caring for others. And we've already seen examples of both these things during coronavirus. You know, any kid that's been making PPE or face shields using the school's 3D printer, as many students have been doing throughout the world, they're not going to be content with filling in worksheets after this. But I think we're also seeing alongside that principals who are loading up the cars with food parcels and taking them out to families in need of that. So I think that's another opportunity for schools. And I think it behoves all of us really now to rethink education, because we mustn't let this opportunity pass. Not least because, let's face it, the disaster capitalists out there are already planning how they're going to make some money out of this crisis. So I think now's the time for what I would call optimistic collectivism to resist that and to take centre stage in rethinking and redesigning our institutions and our organisations. And to do that, we have to start with schools.